The Strait itself is, we're doing a good job. But it would be nice if the countries, including China, if the countries that use it, China uses it 90% of their energy. Japan is 95% of the energy. It would be nice if those countries would get involved. We're negotiating now, and it'd be great if we could do something, but they have to open it up. They have to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Excuse me for this. I'm so sorry. Such a terrible mistake. The fake news will say he accidentally said no. There's no accidents with me, not too many.
So we'll bring you our usual daily update out of the Middle East, although I gotta be honest, the situation with Iran right now is now at the level of just being extremely confusing. On one hand, we know for a fact negotiations are still happening. On the other, Israel and Iran are still very much actively shooting at each other. On one hand, Iran at least marginally claims that the Strait of Hormuz is open for its own allies like China. On the other hand, they apparently just blocked 2 Chinese oil tankers from crossing the strait today. And how are we supposed to interpret that? It could be just mere confusion, perhaps a mishap, but if that's not the case, and there is a deliberate reason why the Iranians blocked the Chinese, then that is some pretty tense geopolitical drama in itself. Is this Iran potentially pissed off that China hasn't really come to their rescue? Is it maybe them trying to force China's hand to ultimately get involved, which they haven't wanted to do thus far, although I would assume that's not really going to work out well for Iran. I think if anything, Beijing would just get pissed off about that and potentially maybe even marginally try to help the Gulf states in defending the strait in that case. But honestly, who knows? I do think, though, that a lot of this back and forth inconsistency, on some level, yes, is a deliberate strategy by President Trump because he wants it to be extremely ambiguous what he's about to do next. And that element of surprise definitely is working to an extent because genuinely no one knows what the heck is happening right now. But secondly, perhaps also is a reflection of the fact that the Iranian government itself is in total disarray and chaos, right? Despite this image that a lot of people have tried to portray, including the Iranians, of their regime being a highly unified front, we've broken down many times how that's really not the case. I think there's the faction within the government that potentially does want to negotiate. Then you have the hardliners like the IRGC. They're arguing with each other. The negotiators will reach out to America and say one thing. The IRGC basically is probably threatening to kill them, and then they'll say another thing. So it's all pretty complicated. It is a sign of that, however. At the same time, if that's what's happening behind the scenes, and yes, the Iranian regime, its stability in itself is rather weak, that also does cast some degree of pessimism on our immediate ability to really make a deal, right? Because how can you negotiate with a government that doesn't really know what it is or what it even wants or what it's doing? And if, okay, half the Iranian government agrees to the deal, the IRGC rebels against it, starts bombing the Strait of Hormuz anyway, then who knows what's about to happen. So that could lend some credence to the possibility we're going to have to open the strait by force, and that is essentially the only option here if we don't want to accept Iran exerting tolls and control over the Strait of Hormuz, which is something I think that neither Trump nor the entire region are willing to accept that happening. So all of that said, guys, we'll bring you the updates out of today. They're going to be a little bit inconsistent. They're going to be kind of confusing and all over the place because that is the situation in the Middle East today, but we'll do our best together to try to spin it together into one big story. That said, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, I first of all would like to report to you that whoever is running the Iranian PR team or their propaganda ministry is still continuing to play the same games. It is now Friday. This thing is dragged on for 5 days. It's pretty well established and proven that talks are happening, yet here we go again with the Iranians claiming there are no negotiations. So a new statement as of today, quote, they've spammed so much fake news, referring there to the Americans, right? This is from Iran. They've spammed so much fake news trying to push energy prices down that the market is just numb now. Keep going. Nobody is buying it anymore. The real prices will show up anyway. Powerful, maybe. But smart, not even close. Burned that fake news card way too early, basically trying to deny that the peace talks are really all that real or effective or serious. And then meanwhile today, yet another country, in this case, Turkey. So Pakistan has already acknowledged, yes, we are mediating, but apparently they've also joined in. So the Turkish foreign minister has confirmed that U.S.-Iran negotiations have officially started. Turkey is now one of the 3 countries actively mediating this war. And yes, now that the mediating country is coming out admitting it, it's kind of hard for Iran to just say, oh, that's Donald Trump making things up. Obviously, there are some real talks. By the way, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff did announce today that next week should be some type of in-person meeting somewhere. So we'll see.
Well, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is at an event in Florida. The president is due there shortly. Steve Witkoff has been discussing the situation in Iran. Let's have a listen.
Well, I think the president has said it all. You'll hear it from him. But we have an adjournment. We have an extension. We view it as a real positive. The Iranians, there are some people there who have denied that we're negotiating. I think we know, everybody in this room knows we are negotiating. It's clear. Some ships are coming through. We may have a different definition of negotiating than they do, where there may be people within their system today who just don't have the ability to admit it. But we're talking to them.
What is your definition of negotiation?
Well, my definition of real negotiating would be right here, and we don't leave until we're done. And we've offered that, and we think there will be meetings this week. We're certainly hopeful for it. Ships are passing. That's a very, very good sign. And I think the president wants a peace deal, but he also believes in and I believe in it too, peace through strength. Without pressure, you never get anybody to the table.
Yeah, so as you just heard there from Steve Witkoff, it sounds like the talks are moving at least in the direction where there may be some in-person meetings in a third country coming as soon as next week. Now, while that certainly doesn't guarantee that a deal is going to be made right now, and I do have my skepticism about that for certain reasons, at the same time, it certainly, first of all, confirms that negotiations once again are happening, but they're at least moving positively enough along that, hey, they haven't immediately broken down, contrary to whatever Iranian sources have tried to claim, and then the media immediately rushes to believe them. Oh, Iran said this, therefore it's true. And let me explain to you, as someone who's clearly of a partial Eastern genetic origin, I guess you could say. So to explain what the Iranians are doing right now, I'm not Persian. I have no connection to the Middle East, but you know, it's sort of similar, right? Let me just say that the concept of saving face is extremely important in Eastern culture. Don't get me wrong. It's a universal human thing. I'm not saying Westerners also don't care about their image, but this sort of like prideful, egotistical thing of you always want to claim victory, you always want to look strong or like you succeeded or you're the winner, right? Very big, obviously, over in the East. I would argue that's what Iran's propagandists are effectively doing right now, which is why we shouldn't take it all that seriously. These are the same people who claim they've wiped out every American military base in the Middle East. They've shot down like 12 of our fighter planes when they haven't shot down a single one. They've killed anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 American soldiers, and the American government is just lying to the families of those soldiers. Just completely and utterly ridiculous stuff. But that said, again, talks are happening. Now, will the talks go anywhere? This is an important question to still keep in mind, because if Iran still wants to reassert, first of all, that it will continue to harass the Strait of Hormuz, or even now it's claiming it controls the Strait of Hormuz, obviously, not only is that an actual violation of the quote-unquote international law that people are constantly virtue signaling about, but more importantly than that, I don't think that's a condition that's going to be accepted by the United States or the Gulf states, or even Europe for that matter. The world's not going to accept it, and so it's going to have to require some type of forcible opening of the strait. As it pertains to the strait, by the way. So you have heard the good news from Witkoff that it sounds like some ships were moving through. We actually covered that story yesterday. However, in a rather strange and odd development today that I'm not sure what to make of, but I want to bring it to you because it was noteworthy, right? Iran today turned back 2 Chinese state-owned container ships that were trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, keep in mind, Iran has publicly stated, first of all, again, they claim that the strait is totally open. That's not true. But then they further went on to claim, well, if you're one of our allies, and that includes China especially, China is allowed to pass, but nobody else is. Now, as of today, they just blocked off the strait for China as well. So you can see this report here from Reuters. Chinese ships today halted in attempt to exit Hormuz, despite the safe passage assurances of Iran. So 2 Chinese container ships turned back after trying to exit the Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz on Friday, according to ship tracking data, despite assurances from Iran that Chinese vessels could pass. So the operator, China's COSCO, had said in a March 25th, so that's 2 days ago, client advisory, that it had resumed bookings for general cargo containers for shipments from Asia to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq. So it does sound here like it was not a ship going from Iran to China. Sounds like it was going from the Gulf states to China. Keep in mind, as it pertains to the Middle East, China buys oil both from Iran and the Gulf states. And as you could probably expect, right? Here's why I find it interesting. There is obviously the possibility that this was a mere miscommunication or a confusion. After all, we told you yesterday about how the IRGC naval commander who was commanding the Strait of Hormuz and that whole situation got taken out. Iran's in disarray. Maybe they thought it was not Chinese, whatever. But if we're to assume this was a serious move, here's the possible outcome that we may have to speculate about. Is that while China and Iran are obviously allies, and you could argue China's basically the top ally that they have at the current moment, it is worth noting that, number one, as you know famously, China has refused to get involved in this war militarily on behalf of Iran. I would argue a major reason for that, besides mere selfishness, is the fact that China, at the same time, still buys a ton of oil from the Gulf states. Now, Iran recently has made it pretty publicly clear that if you're in any way collaborating with something linked to the United States, and that includes Gulf state countries who famously host American military bases and are sort of at this point arguably even involved in the war against Iran, then you are also an enemy. So could this be a potential moment where Iran is trying to say, hey, China, we want you to get involved here. We want you to take our side more firmly. And if you don't do that, we're going to exercise leverage over you. I don't know, right? I'm not trying to speculate too much on this, but if that's true, that would be a major breaking point in this war if Iran and China essentially shattered their real cooperation or their agreements with one another. Who knows, right? Who knows? But if that is the case, however, I would further say that perhaps now that actually, I would argue what Iran's currently doing in the Strait of Hormuz is going to backfire. I've been saying that for many weeks. But if they now try to get China involved in this when China's saying they don't want to be, that might, in their eyes, think, oh, well, China's going to come to our rescue. They're going to get involved. But I would argue the opposite's going to happen. As a matter of fact, I think when you look to the current oil situation over in China and Asia as a whole, the last thing they can afford is for Iran to also start harassing their oil shipments. And I don't think this is something they would be all that happy about.
All across Asia, these massive queues of people waiting to fill up their tanks before fuel prices jump even higher or the fuel runs out. This was the scene in China earlier this week, before prices for petrol and diesel went up for the 5th time this year. But authorities there have put a temporary control in place to reduce the impact on people. All this is happening because of the war in the Middle East, and Iran's blocking of the movement of oil and gas supplies from the Strait of Hormuz. It's no surprise people are angry. They're on strike in the Philippines, saying the government isn't doing enough. The president there has declared a national energy emergency. He says there are enough fuel supplies to last about 45 days, but his government is looking for other sources. An alternative is crucial because the Philippines imports most of its crude oil from the Middle East, and so do a lot of other Asian countries.
Yeah, so if that's the desperate energy situation over in China right now, it literally looks like America in the 1970s, and it's Iran who is not just stopping oil shipments out of the Middle East, but now, for whatever reason, also stopping Chinese oil shipments. Let me ask this question. Do you think that's something China's going to accept? Do you think it's something they're going to be cool with? As I said weeks ago, I thought the answer the entire time was no. Deep down, Beijing, no matter how much they want America to get caught in some quagmire or whatever, to distract us, bog us down, okay, fine, does not want their own energy supply to be messed with. I thought that was the reason why China condemned Iran for striking the Gulf nations. They're trying to basically play both sides of this situation, right? And so ultimately, if Iran is forcing their hand, it does beg some interesting questions of, will China actually get involved with negotiations or even potentially force in the Strait of Hormuz? Now, I have to say, it objectively would be the funniest ending ever to Operation Epic Fury if it's the Chinese who come to help and start fighting alongside us. I don't think that's exactly a strong possibility, to be clear. However, maybe something that we haven't thought about a lot, and I know this sounds crazy, but bear with me for a moment if you consider the current situation in the Strait and the energy situation in China, is hear me out on this. What if China came to be the mediator between America and Iran, right? Because currently, what are we talking about? Who are the mediating countries? Pakistan, Turkey. They're basically just serving as the host. You know, they have no actual leverage over Iran or anything, and it's whatever. Okay, no one fears Pakistan. No offense, but no one fears Pakistan, right? But if China could, and by the way, the sort of irreconcilable difference right now is really Iran wants to control the Strait. That is an unacceptable condition for America. Well, if China came in and basically said to Iran, maybe they'll give them some concessions on other things, but we don't want you controlling the Strait either, because that also messes with our oil supply coming from the Gulf states, then potentially that could be a way to kind of break through the differences between both sides. I don't know if that's going to happen. Frankly, I would not count on Beijing to really be that reliable or ever come to help out, especially America, for very obvious reasons. But who knows? Who knows? This is something to watch, right? I thought it was interesting from the beginning. China and Russia to a large extent, but especially China, just does not come to Iran's help. They basically hang them out to dry. To this very day, they're still buying oil from the Gulf states, which undeniably is pissing off Iran, whether they want to say that publicly. And Trump, by the way, has argued that China should cooperate with the United States when it comes to the Strait, because we both have our own interest in making sure global shipping survives, considering we're basically the two biggest importers and exporters, right, of global shipping. So, I don't know, something to consider there. Now, more news today out of the Strait of Hormuz. It is sounding more and more like some degree of a conflict, right? This won't have a diplomatic resolution because the UAE, alongside Bahrain, so these are two of the Gulf states, have now explicitly said they will join Israeli American forces of light to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, right? So we have heard some rumblings that NATO, slowly but surely, the UK and France are going to come to help. Now the Gulf states, who have said a lot but not really done a lot, maybe necessarily too much besides allow us to use their bases because they're fearing escalation, are basically saying, no, this is unacceptable at this point. We are going to get involved. We are going to help clear the Strait of Hormuz and reopen it basically by force, no matter what Iran tries to do about it. And I guess that's a good news for the supposed coalition. So the UAE is currently pushing to form a multinational naval force to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Well, hopefully you can go talk to Europe for us, right? As anytime Donald Trump asks, they're just like, oh, you're Donald Trump, you're America, you're bad. So, go, maybe you go ask them for us. But anyways, the UAE is willing to deploy its own navy and is actively lobbying allies as well as the United Nations to support the initiative. Again, considering as useless as the United Nations is, technically what Iran is doing right now in the Strait is a violation of international law. It doesn't mean anything, but hey, if countries need that extra added credibility, if that makes Europe feel better about the situation, then sure, I suppose Europe can have that excuse to go in and help out. So far, only Bahrain has backed the proposal, while other countries are remaining cautious about joining the effort. But again, they've been moving at a snail's pace the whole time, so it is some progress for sure. Bahrain just put out this whole propaganda video showing that they're willing to fight. Very funny how all these Middle Eastern countries, they put out more videos, it seems, than they actually fight each other. But, they're kind of taking after Iran and doing the counter video there. I guess also the Indian Navy has now deployed 7 warships to protect oil routes. Not sure what India is really meant to do there, but hey, I guess thank you, right? I suppose it helps out somewhat. And when you look at the current naval deployment across the Middle East, while it is mostly American, you can see even some European assets beginning to build up, like the Charles de Gaulle, right? The French fleet here, European ones sort of headed toward the Middle East. So we will see what happens. But the current total count as we speak, 29 U.S. warships in the Middle East, 7 more on transit. EU has deployed 18 warships, UK 2 warships, and the UN now 2 warships, and Pakistan and India are also sort of getting involved here. So, you know, who knows? In the end, it could be sort of that Persian Gulf War I style moment where all the countries get together and say, we need to open the strait by force. I repeat, it seems at this point that is a more likely outcome than this being a negotiated settlement, at least right now, right? Because I think it's clear that you have to maybe force one last hand on Iran to at least get them to back off the strait. I think that much is obvious, but who knows? I don't know. Maybe a miracle is pulled off at the negotiating table, but thus far, just watching oil markets, watching the fact that more assets are headed to the Middle East and not less, does seem to suggest, right, that the possibility is definitely there. This is going to have a military outcome, and that's what Donald Trump even hinted at today. Take a listen.
Up looking for whatever we want, and we're hitting it, and we have another 3,554 targets left, and that'll be done pretty quickly. And then we, at some point, we're going to have to determine what we do. But they have, they've never seen anything like it.
And certainly we know that Trump loves his tactical ambiguity, so who knows what's going to happen. If anyone can make a deal out of this, you would think it would be Trump. But, the way I currently look at it, I don't see why Iran would stand down from the Strait of Hormuz unless we effectively forced them to, right? Unless we literally went and made them back off of the Strait of Hormuz. I would argue the one diplomatic out that maybe is more realistic, I know probably no one else has given this take, actually is China, though, right? Is actually to go to China and basically say to them, hey, can you tell them to behave? Effectively, like, you have all your own reasons to reopen the strait. You haven't said anything publicly, but deep down, I would think as well Beijing wants the strait open because the fact that it's closed is still screwing them up a lot, despite the fact that Iran is trying to give China clearance. But, using China as the mediator might actually be the one diplomatic resolution to get Iran to back off. But even then, that seems like a long shot, right? I mean, it is worth noting next month, or actually in 2 months, in May, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are set to have a summit, so it could be a token of goodwill beforehand. Hey, we helped you resolve Iran essentially, but who knows? Who knows? If not, though, if China's not a factor there, you can let me know your thoughts. I don't see how Iran would back off the strait unless we basically scared them so much and they said, oh, it's just not worth it, right? So that could all be another possibility if we signal that we're serious about attacking. But still, it seems to me Iran almost wants to bait us into doing that, right? They understand that an effort to forcibly reopen the strait, it could have some cost to it. It could intensify the issue. It could cause a little bit more of a short-term energy crisis at the current moment. And so they're basically trying to maybe force that last bit of economic and even military damage on us before, they take the exit door of the conflict, having like nothing left to really do there. I don't know. But that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.